Hello, everyone, and welcome. Good morning. Welcome to all of you. And I'm Melanie Ottmere. I'm an assistant professor in the communications department here at UFE, and I will be hosting our panel for today. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that UFE is situated on the lands of the Stalo people, and they are the people of the river. But as I've learned, they are also a people deeply connected to the land, and with the recent floodings of the Sumas Prairie, we are reminded of our deep and practical relationship with the territory within which we reside. And I respect these lands today as we see the rains are falling around us, and hoping that we can find peace in our land soon. Today's speaker spotlight panel is focused on the future of work in communications, and we have a whole panel of experts who have kindly come to give us their expertise, and we welcome them. And they're going to introduce themselves to you. And what we're going to do is, after the introductions, we'll have some question and answer time available at the end. Otherwise, I'll be posing some questions to our panelists. So keep in mind, if you're participating in the webinar, that the last 10 minutes will be your opportunity to ask any questions that you're interested. So I'd like to start with introductions. Jessica, if you would begin.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica. I use she, her pronouns. I'm currently a manager of marketing and digital content at UBC. I'm a digital communications and marketing hybrid, so I do a little bit of everything. But the focus of my work has been mostly on digital comms the last few years. I've had a chance to work in the private sector, but I've mostly worked in the public sector in healthcare and in higher ed the last 7 years. And I'm very pleased to be here today. So I've been asked to share a little bit of info in my introduction, so I'll do that now. Melanie, is that what we were doing?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay, so a memorable moment in communications that's been impactful for my career. So I'll use a recent one. So I led digital comms for Vancouver Coastal Health during the first 18 months of the pandemic. And that was obviously a challenging time. But one of the most memorable moments was we started making TikToks to try and help raise awareness of key public health and safety issues around COVID transmission. And we were engaging with a younger audience for that. So that was pretty memorable, sitting at a boardroom table, explaining like who Doja Cat is to senior leadership, and trying to explain what looked like fluffy and silly trends, and explain how they were, critical communications channels for us in a really serious time. So I'll never forget that. And what's my connection to UFE? So I'm a friend of UFE. My old friend Christopher Towler, who teaches at UFE, invited me to be here today.
Thank you so much, Jessica. I'm going to just move around my screen as I see it, and I'm going to ask next for Chantal. Would you just introduce yourselves to us?
Hi, I'm Chantal Sears. I am a current student at U of V. I went back to school as a mature student last September and had to take either communications or English towards my degree, and opted for communications and really enjoyed it. And then my professor at the time, Susan Francis, mentioned about a communication certificate that was available. So I looked into that and ended up completing it last summer, or this past summer, I guess. And I'm still at UFE trying to finish my never-ending degree, one class at a time. I'm also a police officer. I work in White Rock, and I do community response unit here, which is pretty much jack of all trades, master of none. Lots of different community, whatever the community needs, I'm around for. And then I also do the media relations for the detachment. So I've been the media relations officer since I think 2016 here, maybe 2017. For a few years. So I write the media releases, and if there's anything big that happens, I do the on-camera interviews for major networks and stuff. And probably a memorable moment for me at UFE was, well, there's been several, and anybody's in my classes right now, they would know that technology is not my friend, and I am trying really hard to learn things, but everybody's been super kind. And I remember being the younger student back in the day, and there was mature students and wondering like, what the heck are these people doing here? And here I am as that person and trying to make a PowerPoint, and it takes me 6 hours, and everybody else does it in like 2 minutes. So Yeah, technology's not been my friend, but I had to make for public speaking 235, I had to do make a video this past summer, and it was when the heat wave was on, and it was 42 degrees out. And I had to bake a recipe and demonstrate it. And so I had my oven on, and I do have AC in my house, but because I had to do multiple takes, it was really hot, and I was sweating and trying to look professional, but like layers of clothes coming off, because I'm like, we're just doing this in a tank top. And yeah, anyways, I did well, but there was some good humor. It's been really fun.
That's a great fun moment, Chantal. Thank you. And Brahmjot?
Hey everybody, my name is Braham Jod. I'm a senior systems administrator for Sodexo, where I majorly work I'm a technical specialist. I work into their internal IT team. My key role includes, but not limited to, managing a lot of IT architecture and infrastructure and leading major IT projects across our North American counterparts. I have vast experience, I would say, of 10 years in IT. I have worked in Hong Kong, I've worked in Canada in multiple sectors: education, health, private, government. I'm fluent in 4 different languages. I speak English, Chinese, specifically Cantonese only, Punjabi and Hindi. Communication has been a key part. During pandemic, technical folks or IT folks are generally stereotype that they're socially awkward, not very good at communicating things out. But during the pandemic, there's been a real push that IT teams actually have to be the forefront of communication, because so much has fallen on IT these days that if we're shutting a corner, it's not going to happen. Nothing's going to move. So when I took up communications, part of my BIS degree, which I'm focused on management, it helped me sort of to open up myself and write more, I guess, fluent emails and communicate with users much better in order to get the message out there. Because, for example, we had a lot of folks literally working from home. Working from home for me is an ease. I enjoy working from home. Somebody in payroll is going to freak out when you tell her, yeah, you got to move home. Now they're thinking we got to move a whole cabinet home because that's where their files are. We made a lot of adjustments, and communicating and training that was crucial. And part of that was how you draft, how you make a video, and how you train these users and set up all these support functions. So a communication class through UFE, which I think my professor was Suman, she was great, really helped me gear towards that, even with all my experience I had.
Yes, and thank you for mentioning that kind of changing landscape of communications. It's something we'll talk about today. Let's welcome Keenan. Keenan comes to us from a very different place than he thought today. So maybe you want to mention that, Keenan.
Yeah, for sure. So normally I would be zooming in from our office in Langley, which is on the unceded traditional ancestral territory of the Katzie, Kwantlen, and Semiahmoo First Nations. But today I am on Comanche territory in Texas. I am stranded due to a COVID test not coming back within the 72-hour window, which is very frustrating, but it is a happy accident, it seems, because I am here for American Thanksgiving and I have a family hosting me that is lots of fun. So I am here meeting my girlfriend's grandparents and parents and all of that. Was here for a wedding, and it's just extended a little longer than I expected. So for the first time ever, I am coming in from Comanche territory. I am the founder of Longhouse Media. I graduated from UFE in 2018. And I see some familiar names on the attendees list. I got Dana Landry, Kim Norman, 2 of my favorites. Dana, I understand, is teaching one of my team members, Simran, this semester. So I hope that you treat her very well, because she is the best business decision I ever made, was bringing her in. So, and I know she is enjoying the classes. So I did the professional communication certificate as part of my business degree, and I really, really enjoyed it, especially the public speaking class, which I did with Kim Norman. I got entered into some sort of public speaking contest out of that, and I ended up winning a $500 scholarship. So my favorite memory of communications is when I got $500 from doing it. And I will say that communication is a part of everything that I do. Yes, I work in marketing. Yes, I do business, but I send emails, I write letters, I leave Google reviews for businesses, I talk to people on the phone, and sometimes I speak and do presentations. Later today, I'm doing a graduation ceremony for UVic, which I'm also going to be zooming in for, and I'm going to have to use my communication skills. So anyone who's attending this, yeah, communication's the best.
Thank you, Keenan. I appreciate all the connections to what you're doing in your work now and how that relates back to what you did in your coursework. Thank you. Harla, last but not least.
Hello, everyone. My name is Harla, and I'm a recent graduate from UFB. So I graduated in my bachelor's in criminal justice with a communications minor. Mind you, I finished my degree over the pandemic, so it was kind of difficult getting my foot into the door in the professional field, but luckily I applied at UFB as an auxiliary, and I got hired with a couple of departments. So my first position was the parking services assistant. So at first I wasn't sure what was that going to entail, but it was a great opportunity because I kind of utilized all my skills from communications into that, with writing emails, making phone calls, working with different departments and external, oh, hi, Dana, working with different external organizations to accommodate their parking needs and all that. And I'm currently now working for the South Asian Studies Institute as a research assistant. And my job requires me to work with our partners in India with the UFE Chandigarh campus, and that intercultural communication that I wished I've learned more on at UFE is a tool that I'm slowly learning and accommodating myself. Yeah, and just working among everyone. And yeah, I'm from Abbotsford, and it's raining a lot here, and that's making me very nervous. And yeah.
Thank you, Harla. One of the things that we're interested in today, for the sake of those that might not know what skills are required, or they're looking at careers in communications and thinking about what do I need to advance from the university context into the workplace. So Jessica, maybe I could start with you and just ask you, what are some of the communication skills that students and graduates need to succeed in the workplace?
This is a great question, and it's something my answer for you would have changed over the course of my career. So I'm, putting my mind back into the first 3 or 4 years that I was working, and something that I found hugely helpful was, when you're a student, you are writing for lots of different contexts. Sometimes it's papers, sometimes it's more brief pieces. In my first few years of working, being able to distill what my main message and what my suggestions are into a brief, concise, but thorough email or presentation, that was hugely critical and helpful for my progression. And the reason for this, as I've learned over time, is the folks that you're working with at all different levels, they might have 20 things going on that day. And your project or what you're pitching them on is maybe just one piece of their day. So being able to just boil things down, be concise, get the message across, spoiler alert, being a good communicator is helpful in your communications career. So that's one thing that I found really impactful. The other skill that I think would be really helpful is, we talk about, I'm not sure if people have heard about the T shape when you're developing your career. So the long part of the T is what's your specialty, what's the thing you're focusing on. And then the top part of the T is, you might have some more shallow interests or skills elsewhere. For me, it's been all about developing a couple other things on that T part. So communication skills, awesome, you need them. And then having something else in your back pocket that you can bring to the table to help you provide value at work. So for me, I really love art. I love creating graphics. I like making videos. I've always liked to do that in my personal time. I bring that skill of mine to the workplace. Just to, even when we're working with contractors, understanding what designers are dealing with, and bringing some ideas to the table. So those are 2 things that I think are helpful.
And Chantel, you work in a very distinct type of work with policing. And I'm just thinking about, it sounds like you stumbled a bit into communications at UFB, and yet it sounds like it's been very helpful for you. Can you talk a little bit about your particular workplace and what kind of skills that you would think students would need in terms of communication in your workplace?
Right. Yeah. So I did stumble into communications only because it was either English or communications that was mandatory, and I chose communications and have really enjoyed it. And I find it has been relevant to life with conflict resolution skills or communication styles, and of course at work. Find dealing with the clients here, obviously you need to be able to communicate effectively and matter-of-factly, and the public speaking aspect of communications. I thought I was a public speaker because I was already doing communications and public speaking for the media, and in a community position, I do a lot of public speaking, but I learned so much about myself as well as just best practices from 235, which 125 and 251 gave me a lot of practice as well, but 235 really drilled down on certain aspects of the public speaking, which I thought I was doing pretty good, but I think I've excelled now. I've taken in some of the feedback I got from my prof, Jess, and just learned to, having to videotape yourself and then rewatch it. I mean, it's one thing to see yourself on the news and they just edit it however they want. So you got like a 10-second clip of, if you get 10 seconds, maybe 2 seconds, and it is what it is. But to see yourself on a video that you've made and you have to redo it, and just different things I've learned.
Mhm.
And then the media releases, learning, like I think 251 drilled down to, I didn't realize that Susan pointed this out, but I had always given 2 spaces after the end of a sentence, and I don't know when that ended, but apparently it ended and I didn't get noticed. So I've always been doing 2 spaces up until she's like, it's only 1. So yeah, just learning better writing skills. The active voice was a big challenge for me to write in an active voice. And I didn't even know there was such a thing as an active voice. So that was new. And yeah, work-wise, I send emails, I send memos, I write news releases, I deal with suspects, take interviews, written statements. There's a lot of communications everywhere in every aspect of the job, but every course I've taken, the 3 courses that I did take in communications, and I plan on taking more upper level ones, have been very, very beneficial.
It's interesting that a lot of you are talking about written skills and how to write, and that's something that we are working hard on in our department to teach those skills. And sometimes it's hard to give students a sense of why they're so important. So I appreciate that you're commenting on them. Brahmjot, in terms of writing skills and such, talk to me a little bit about the kind of writing you do in your work. You mentioned some of it in your introduction and how that connects in with what you've learned in your studies. So
the amount of writing I do is I would say multiple different kinds of writing. There's the type of writing I do for my internal team, which is technical. There's amount of writing I do for a user base, which is more on a guiding and training based for them. And there's a document which is called SOP, Standard Operating Processes, which is a very high level strategic document for the overall company. And obviously I also have day-to-day emails. So my documentation is geared towards, I have to quickly navigate through, hey, internally, my technical documents, I have to make everybody is able to understand the language I'm talking, basically. And when I write a user-based document, I have to really think on how to, I guess, present myself and present my training and my idea, because not everybody's going to understand my technical terminology. So I have to tone down my, I guess, technical side and, bring up my human side and perceive and put myself in the shoes of a person who's going to be using this. It might be easy for me, but that person might not understand. So, if I'm talking about, hey, send me a command, I might change that to, hey, click this, and here's a photo, and here's how you do this. So I incumbent those guides with words and a lot of screenshots, and a lot of little pointers, which indicates and helps a lot of people. And a few things I think definitely help a lot is writing skills is so important. Like when you're talking to different people at different bases of your job and you're talking with various folks from different departments, you need to be able to know how to, I guess, acclimate yourself to different groups quickly. In my ever world changing, it's so fast that I have to, I might be talking to somebody who's very technical in one spot, and then on the other spot, somebody who has no idea what IT is, and on the third spot who thinks they know someone. So I have to adjust my level of communication accordingly with them. And, definitely taking up the communication class helped me a lot. I'm actually planning to take another one. I think it's 390 or is it 420 this year, which actually walks you through on how to create formal guides even in a technical standard. So that's one I'm taking. And the other 2 things I think important is confidence. I think you need to be confident to just talk your mind out. I always have a feeling that worst comes to worst, the answer might be no. Right? You put yourself out there and you hear what other person has to say. That's what matters the most. Second is expression. Even We're virtual, we're in Teams, and we're in person. I think body language matters a lot. Like you're not able to see my hand, but my hand's down there moving actually. So unfortunately, you can't situate my camera that way.
Yeah.
They speak a lot, right? My facial expressions, everything, it gives you an idea of how a person is perceiving your communication. And sometimes just by your facial expression, you can tell if the person actually understands what are you talking about, and you can quickly change the way you communicate.
So you're pointing out the importance of really in what you're saying of addressing and knowing your audience and knowing your purpose in those ways. I know we talk a lot about that in communication courses. And so Keenan, is that something that resonates with the writing that you do in your work?
Yeah, so knowing your audience is very important in marketing. So part of what we do at Longhouse is video production, social media, writing good ads, all of those things. You need to be very in tune with the target market. And I will say that almost every billable hour of work that I do involves writing in some capacity, whether I'm writing a video script, writing the copy for an advertisement, or even writing like sales proposals. All of those things I have to be very thoughtful and concise with my words, because if you write too much in a sales proposal, they're just going to say no. And if you're writing too long of a video script, no one's going to watch it because Netflix and YouTube has ruined everyone's attention spans. So I would say, yeah, knowing your audience and then being thoughtful and concise with your writing would be the most important things.
Harla, you mentioned in your introduction that you are dealing with intercultural communication. It's one of the courses that I think is really gaining ground in our department now and is of interest to many people. Can you talk a little bit about that aspect of communications in terms of what would you have needed? What could we provide, not just in that area, but in our department? And I could ask all of you to think about this that have been students here, but Harla, what would have helped you in training that in that area?
What would have helped me in that training in that area? I guess like just knowing what's appropriate when to say something or when not to say something. I know I quickly had to Google a couple of things of what not to do and what to do in intercultural communications. And one of the things I practice currently is that I try to refrain from making any commentary that's limited to only our Western ideals. So I want to be able to have conversations with people, but not have it so marginalized with stereotypes or certain sayings that we understand here that people won't understand across the globe. I guess just knowing, like, we can talk. It's a craft to learn to talk to one another. Period. I think through emails and conversations. But when it comes to talking to people across the globe, and English is a very difficult language to begin with, that in itself is a craft that I'm honestly looking forward to see that UFV touching upon, because I probably might just come back and just take that course, because I think that is the future as the world is becoming smaller in terms of connecting with people quickly and more sufficiently. I definitely think having that skill set under your belt is absolutely a must have for sure. And yeah.
So that's one key element you've identified for us. And I think we're addressing that in our department. I'm just wondering, I know, Jessica, you're a friend of UFV and connected in, not necessarily a student, but thinking back as well on your own training. For any of you, what is it that you feel that you maybe missed, that something that we could be developing? It's very helpful for us to hear from our students, our graduates, and experts in the field. Is what is it that we need to be connecting with as a department?
I think one key thing that I was missing was the ability to switch around. And now I've learned that over the years, and thanks to some of the great mentors I have in my current job and in previous jobs, the ability to learn how to gear towards a certain email towards, let's say, your junior compared to your VP or your manager is really different, right? You can't say, "Hey, what's up?" to your VP. It just doesn't sit well that way. It's not going to go look nice. And as the new generation comes up, the hierarchy between their mindset is very different. They think everybody's equal, and why in the world the VP needs to be treated different? But we still have the older folks in the workforce who do not think that way, right? and they might take offense to that, or it's disrespectful because that person is not addressing you by your first name or Mr. or Mrs. So I think that portion is really missed, and it'll be a great benefit to have.
Anyone else want to jump in on that, on what you think would be helpful for students moving forward that they might not be receiving now in their studies?
Something popped up for me. Obviously, I haven't gone through the program, so I can't speak to the courses, but something I've noticed a gap in skills in my, not my colleagues, but in my industry, is having this ability to take things like media releases or more traditional old school types of communication formats and almost like translating them for social media, because a lot of people are more so getting their news from places like Twitter, Reddit, other online forums. And, as Keenan mentioned, our attention spans are pretty much ruined these days. People want the message quickly and in a way that they recognize. And that was not, I was at school a few years back, but that's not something that was really offered when I was taking communications courses. And it's something that when I worked at Vancouver Coastal Health, that was something that we piloted, was how can we make these pretty standard media releases, how can we make them readable in a Twitter format? So we experimented with doing Twitter threads, we experimented doing a bunch of different things. So I think that's a skill set that's just going to be more and more needed in the coming years.
So that leads me to ask all of you, and I'm not sure who wants to address this, so I'll leave it open, is what do you see happening in the future in communications? So we've talked about what your courses prepared you for, where we might step up and do some more areas that you've identified already. What do you think is coming up in the future of communications? Go ahead, Keenan.
To that, yeah. I think the biggest trend in communications and the biggest eye-opener for me is when I was younger, I would try to sound smart. I would try to sound very intelligent. I think the biggest difference or the biggest change will be there's a lot of intelligence in being able to make your language and communication accessible. So I think the biggest transition will be that, especially when we're working with cross-border, like different languages. Keeping things simple and keeping things as efficient as possible will be a really big thing that's going to happen.
Others of you have any thoughts about what other things might be cropping up in the communications world?
I think more and more is that the way people communicate these days, as Jessica said, that the attention span is almost non-existent these days. You want things like this. More and more folks are going to expect things literally on their hand, on their phone, easy to read, or big titles saying, "Hey, there's a flood in BC," and that's all they want to read. The ability to communicate is going to shrink a lot because you're limited to that title space. If you can't capture somebody's intention by just your title, they're not going to click into it. Your message is not going to get across. So I think that's going to be it's already there, and it's going to get even worse, or I guess improvement for somebody at some point.
Right. Kim is saying in the chat that you're making a good point about situational context and communications in specific situations, and how we need to be attentive to the audience in that regard as well. Chantal, I don't mean to keep picking on you as someone who's stumbled into communications, but just thinking about if you had an opportunity to address students who are maybe thinking about taking a communications class, not sure, not understanding maybe the value, what advice would you give them about that?
Absolutely, to take it. And I wish I would have taken it a long time ago, and I'm sure it would have changed, so I would need to retake it anyways, but it was so relevant. And out of everything I've taken, I'm taking a portfolio class now, which is relevant, but I'm already in a career and towards the downslope perhaps in my career. So maybe getting a second career after that with the portfolio class. But I didn't realize the benefit of the communications class. It was a mandatory. It was either English or communications for the degree. And I just took communications because it was the best online offering, I guess, at the time, and pleasantly surprised at how relevant it is to every aspect of my life, whether it's communicating with, I learned different methods of communication where I thought I had a nice communication style before, but it was very streamlined, wasn't very broad. Now I have one that's more professional, one that's more relaxed. I think my speaking skills are more engaging and perhaps a little bit more authentic, whereas prior to taking the communications classes and the public speaking one, I may have been a little bit more standoffish and a little bit more rigid. Now I see the benefit of being authentic, and how to engage more with, as previously said, like facial expressions and eye contact and hand gestures. And communication is a totality. It's not just the words, right? It's the method it's delivered and the mannerisms and so forth. So yeah, communications is absolutely, I would recommend. I wish there was a major for communications, because I would be the first person to sign up for it.
Well, someday soon, very soon. I'm not sure how much we're allowed to announce, but you can expect an announcement, a positive announcement in that regard. And yeah, you might be our first student signing up, but things are there's a very strong indication that's going to come quite soon. So we are excited to be able to give a pre-announcement about that. So thank you for leading into that. Harda, you're a recent graduate of UFV, and I'll ask you the same question. If maybe you do talk to students about communications. I have a household of university-aged sons, and they constantly tease me about communications is the lesser English. So I'm having to make the case all the time about how that is not the case. So Harla, have you heard that kind of talk? Is there something you can share with our prospective students about the value of communications? Thank you, Chantal, for what you've already told us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And thank you, Chantal. I think some of those points that you brought up, I'm probably going to mirror them, but this reminded me of a conversation I had with a younger relative of mine, and she's going to university soon. And pretty much she's like, no, I love essays. I love English. I love literature. So I'm not going to do communications because it doesn't make any sense. It's very simplified English. And I was like, no, I think it's a form of communicating that is more adaptable for the workplace, and depending on where you want to go in the future. And she doesn't know where she wants to go. She was kind of like me when I was younger. I think just having that skill set of learning how to talk to either your superiors, your juniors, the in-betweeners, learning how to talk to the publics. I think communication is a very strong skill set to adapt to, whether it be learning how to write better, learning how to write more thoughtfully, more personally, more professionally, or learning how to communicate better, learning how to talk more better. Because I know I use a lot of filler words, and that's one thing I'm still working on when it comes to public speaking for myself. So I would encourage people to take at least 1 or 2 courses in communications and see how they feel. And I noticed a lot of improvements with my emails throughout the years, especially when talking to my professors. Even in the workplace, I noticed I can write much quicker and much better, and in a respectful tone, in a timely manner, because I used to take ages writing emails. I'm like, how do I address this person? How do I go about this? Like, being that first year university student, it's nerve-wracking, and your professor might just email you back like a quick 1-sentence message, and it's like sent from iPhone, and it's like, oh, okay. So I slaved away 20 minutes writing an email, and that was that. But the point is, communication is a tool, and I think it's going to be a tool for wherever you go. So, yeah.
So we're talking about students that may be looking at communications or interested in taking some courses. That's great advice and great feedback. And those are the things that we try and tell students as professors and as representatives of the department. But I think it really means so much more when professionals and students tell those stories for us. So that's really great advice and information for them. I'm going to put now turn it a bit. Here we have students who have committed to communication courses, have decided that that's an area of interest for them. We're talking today about the future of work in communications. So I'm just wondering, Jessica, I'll start with you. Is there advice you would give to students who have been studying in this area and really want to break out into working in communications? What would be your advice to them?
My advice would be to hit up people and ask them about their careers. This is something that I did a lot in the early days. I know people love to roast LinkedIn, make fun of LinkedIn, but LinkedIn can be a very powerful platform for meeting new people and learning about how people got started. So that was something I used to do. I'd find someone who I thought had the coolest career that I wanted to emulate. Maybe they worked somewhere that I cared about or had a cool job. And I would send them just a cold message on LinkedIn. I'd say, hey, I think you have a really neat career. I'm studying this. I have a few questions for you. Would you be open to chatting with me over DM or Zoom, even having a coffee? And you would be surprised at the number of people who will say yes. And I get a lot of messages like this, and I say yes to probably about 90% of them. Sometimes some of them are not worded very respectfully, and I, say no. But yeah, don't be afraid to reach out and talk to people and find out what was helpful to them, for two reasons. The first is you'll learn maybe some things that will help you. The second is your network just increased by one person. And I'll be really frank, all of the best jobs or the career building roles that I've gotten was through a network. I live in Vancouver. I'm not from Vancouver. I didn't know anybody when I moved here. I don't have any family friends here. And that was how I built my network, was reaching out. So I would, it's scary and it feels weird, but push yourself and you might be surprised by the results.
That's great advice. Thank you, Jessica. Keenan, you're a founder of your own organization. So that's a different way of breaking into the communications world. So talk to us a little bit about what that process was like for you.
Yeah, and like even to extend on that last point, communication as a degree is awesome, but any degree is only as valuable as you can market it. And communications doesn't have as direct of a path as, say, a finance degree getting in at the bank. Communications is really applicable to all industries, and the amount of salary you can command, the amount of respect you can command from your degree really depends on how you explain it to people. I did start my own business. I've always been interested in business and in marketing, especially. And communications really just played into that. As I said earlier, everything that we do in terms of our billable hours is reliant on our ability to communicate. So in terms of breaking into the communications industry, I would say find what your passion is and do what Jessica said. Talk to people who are in an industry related to your passion, and just talk to them about how you can apply your unique communication skills to that job to make them more money. Because if you can make someone $200,000, guess what? You can ask them for $100,000 and they're going to be rubbing their hands thinking, oh, I'm getting such a good deal. Heck, you could probably, if you think you can make them 300,000, you can ask for 200,000. The possibilities are endless. You just have to be very, not aggressive, but you have to go out there and get it.
Right. You have to communicate and network and
you have to communicate. There you go.
You have to keep working those communication skills and sounds like you just need to be also courageous in that sense. And you're like you were saying, Jessica, being brave to make those connections. Here's kind of an interesting question, and I don't know what your answer would be, so I'm interested in knowing, what do you want to know that you don't know about communications? What do you want to know that you don't know? What do you ponder about the field, about your thoughts about communications?
One of the things that I have had to learn as I go the most on is cultural differences in communications. I have learned certain things, like even like being in an Indigenous owned business, I've had to learn, you raise your hand to the creator. I've had to learn to do a territorial acknowledgement. I've had to learn to say my own ancestry. Those are things that are culturally super important. And sometimes if you're communicating to an audience and you do the wrong thing, you can lose them in the first 5 minutes. It doesn't matter if you're speaking for 2 hours. If you lose them in the first 5 minutes, you're not being a good communicator. So the biggest gap in my knowledge in communication is probably cultural awareness. And there's so many different unique cultures.
That's a great point. I know that Keenan and Brahmjot talked about the importance of connecting with those from other cultures, other areas of communications that you think about or wonder about that you don't feel like you maybe fully mastered at this point. Harla or Chantal or Jessica, if you could speak to that.
Yeah, I'll touch on a couple of things. I do have to agree with both Brahmjot and Keenan. Intercultural communication is going to be the future. And I think we need to learn more about that and just know what's the correct way of communicating with people around the world. In addition to what else I'm curious about, I don't know if anybody's been following like the UFE alerts, but Dave Pinton, he's an absolute mastermind with learning how to comment with people's comments. in distressful situations. I was just reading a couple when the recent floodings were happening, and just learning how one would know how to respond to people publicly on a platform in a comment section. I know I oftentimes get lost in a YouTube comment section when people are being absolutely negative, but knowing how to respond and just how to approach that. I know I learned some elements of that through my public relations courses, which I recommend any student to take. But just knowing how to do that on the spot and what formula to use, and yeah.
So I'm just going to ask, we're just slowly getting back some of our other participants. I see Kim and Susan are here. Do you have any questions for the panel? Because we were going to use the last 10 minutes for question and answer. So I'd like to open that up if you have something for us. And in the meantime, I guess I could also check back in. Bramjot, you work for an organization, or did you actually, did you start your company that you're working for? Or did you join a company, and what was your process like to do so?
I joined. I didn't start my company. I joined. I would like to open one day, but I need a handful of manpower to do that. So I joined Sodexo. I worked for them almost, it's been, I guess, coming on 6 years now, surprisingly. So the process was actually very rigorous, to be honest. I had to go through a full application. It was about like 6-7 pages, and when I filed it in, took a couple of months to get approved. And when I got to the interview, it's probably one of the most hardest interviews I've ever gone through in my life for a job. I remember walking in, my manager at that time had a few little introduction. It was just came off very intimidating to me. Later on, it was different. And we just went on with it. He has a big piece of paper in front of him, and he just went on with this question, and I was drawing diagram and explaining concepts on the spot. So it was very different from all the other interviews I ever did.
And there's a question that came in the chat box from Susan, just saying, any tips for communicating an interview, either as a student or graduate, or as an employer hiring? What kind of communication is important in that employment interview?
I think you need to be upfront and honest. And I've had the chance to sit in a few of the hiring and be on the other side of the table as well. And people with experience can easily tell when you're trying to make stuff up. Like, it's out there, we know people make stuff up in their resume, it's fine. But when you're in person, you're making stuff up, it's very obvious. Specifically, if you're applying for a candidate field like IT, right? Just asking a few questions, we can gaze upon your depth of technical knowledge. But if you're upfront and honest, be like, hey, I just don't know that. I don't know that question, but I'm willing to learn. That will be perceived much better than you trying to answer and not get the right one. Right.
So I'm seeing, I was
hope
just
I answered that
seeing a
question.
lot of head nodding from your other panelists. They're agreeing with you on that front. Jessica, did you want to add something in there?
Yeah, sure. I just think that was an excellent point. And as someone who also does a lot of interviews, I would so much rather the candidate let me know, yeah, I'm not sure, but I would love to learn. Because to me, that shows that, when you put that person into a work environment, you're going to be presented with so many things that you don't know the answer to. That's normal. That's expected. And you can get yourself into trouble by trying to pretend like you know the answer in a work environment. So yeah, I was just really agreeing with that. Another tip that I would give for interviewing is when you're talking to a potential employer, in your head, maybe do this in advance, try and almost translate your own resume. What are the skill sets, experiences, what's the value that you can bring to your employer? Think about it in terms of them. How can I help my potential team and boss? Make it less about yourself and why you're so awesome, because I know you're all awesome. Make it about how can I bring value? And sometimes that's taking like 20 minutes before the interview to just even jot down some notes and do some work ahead of time.
And I can add to that point, if that's okay.
Do.
So during the pandemic, I actually got promoted, and part of the promotion, my VP made sure I re-gave my interview. So I obviously, they knowing me, I had to come up with something out of the box. And it being virtual, I actually made a presentation. It was about like 7 slides, and I went through it discussed my experience, and they loved it. They're like, we've never seen it this way. It was something I thought of last minute, and I actually have the presentation. If anybody wants to see it, I can show it. It was like, I'm surprised I did a good job, I'll be honest with you. But if you come out of the box and you put yourself out there, people will love it. Other than your standard, you walk in and like, hey, let's answer a few questions.
So we've talked a lot today about just various aspects of communication, how important it is in the work that we do, things that we know we still want to learn, things that were helpful that we learned. I think Kim was asking a question for us in the chat, just wondering, I think Chantel spoke earlier about having something in your back pocket. I appreciated this insight, as I think sometimes we wonder how the skills we gain and the courses we take may benefit us in the future. What seemingly unrelated skills or talents have you all found you've been able to draw on in your careers and workplaces that you didn't expect to be so valuable, especially in respect to the communication that you do? So what surprised you about yourself as a communicator in your workplace that you could bring to that role? Harla, do you have something in mind?
Yeah, it's just something briefly, and I think it's in conjunction with the criminal justice degree, but learning how to confront confrontation, or just being comfortable talking to people that are confronting you. And that in itself will take you, like, learning how to craft, learning that craft, and learning how to adapt in those situations when someone's absolutely, you know, disagreeing with you, or they just don't like the response you're giving, but learning how to present yourself and you know, be able to listen in those moments and ask important questions. I think, yeah, no, I surprise myself a lot being like how patient I am sometimes with people, especially with a couple of my jobs. And yeah, just knowing how to handle people that, you know, are just pretty much having a bad day essentially. So yeah.
So as we wind down the last couple of minutes, I just wondered if there's anything any of you wanted to add to the conversation that you haven't already in terms of the future of work and communications and some of the things that we've talked about today. Is there anything on your mind that you'd like to finish with? Chantel?
Just wanted to add to when people were talking about interview tips and so forth. Another thing that when we're vetting here, and we vet for employment or for volunteer positions, but social media, your online profile. I'm lucky and fortunate that online stuff wasn't available for me when I made my silly years there, but a lot of things, and I'm sure everybody already knows this, but I'm just going to say it because I have applications coming through recently that I'm like, oh my gosh, your email address is GoFly69 or something. And I'm like, you're applying for an actual position, like get an email address that is mature. Like no, yeah, exactly. Right. And vet your, like, I'm going to be able to Google you and Google yourself, find out what's out there and try to clean it up a little bit, or I don't know, be careful what you post.
That's an excellent point to close on in terms of looking at the future of work for our students in practical ways in communications. I'd really like to thank all of you. What a wonderful gift you've given us of the time and your expertise and your wisdom to speak to future students, current students, to us as communication professors. We truly appreciate it. And I apologize for the technical glitch that we had to our panelists and to our attendees. I have no idea what happened, but that is the realm of communication too, is dealing with technology and learning to roll with that as well. So we thank everybody for your time. Thank you so much for giving us so much wonderful things to think about in terms of communication. I know I'm coming away from this myself, just thinking about all the things that you've shared. It's been great. So thanks again. And we sure appreciate you being with us all today. Thanks, everyone.